His eyesight was so poor that he couldn't pursue his first career choice as a lawyer. So instead, he chose to become one of the most well-known college football icons in history. John Heisman, a name synonymous with college football excellence, was born on October 23, 1869 in Cleveland, Ohio, just 2 weeks before the first college football game in history between Rutgers and Princeton. Heisman grew up in Titusville, Pennsylvania, where his father made a decent living making barrels for the oil industry, an industry that was exploding at the time. Heisman played varsity for Titusville High School from 1884 to 1886. His father, Michael, refused to watch his games, calling them a waste of time and brutal. He went on to play football at Brown University, then Penn, playing as a center and guard from 1887 to 1890. I thought I'd include a tidbit about college education to give you an idea of what it took to attend college at that time. From Heisman, the Man Behind the Trophy by John M. Heisman and Mark Schlabach, published in 2012. Near the end of the 19th century in America, a college education was still an opportunity seized by the precious few who could afford it through hard work and family sacrifice. When Heisman attended Penn's law school, his tuition was $305 for 3 years of courses, plus $180 per year for boarding and textbooks. The students who graduated from what would later become the Ivy League schools normally went on to be heads of state or industry. $305 in 1885 would be $10,530 today, which sounds like a bargain for 3 years of university, doesn't it? For further comparison, a carpenter made $19.32 a week at 60 hours a week. So basically 10-hour days, 6 days a week at 32 cents per hour. A common laborer made $9.06 a week at roughly 15 cents an hour. Egad, this doesn't sound like much of a living. In 1891, an incident occurs that alters Heisman's life forever. From Heisman, the Man Behind the Trophy. In the end, Pennsylvania's game against Rutgers at Madison Square Garden changed Heisman's life forever and altered the future of American football. The Garden's massive lighting system was hoisted on large carries by pulleys all the way to the top of the arena. To service and change elements, the lights were lowered and worked on, fired up for testing, then hauled back up into position. While one of these units was being serviced and tested, Heisman ran by while chasing an errant ball. As Heisman retrieved the ball, the galvanic lighting system came on, emitting noxious and acrid fumes, which were normally not noticeable at the ceilings, but quite strong at ground level. Heisman's eyes were immediately flashed and stung by the bright lights and hot fumes. Blinking back tears, he quickly returned to the team, but with blurred vision. Heisman's condition continued throughout the game, though he hoped with each passing minute that his vision would clear up. When the team returned to Pennsylvania campus, it was apparent there was a serious problem. After the accident in New York, Heisman couldn't see to read. Navigating to and from class proved no problem for him, but reading the volumes of books required in his law studies was impossible. In consulting a doctor, he was advised not to read for an extended period of time, maybe 3 to 6 months. The doctor's prescription was unacceptable for Heisman, who was about to begin his final year of law school. But the doctor warned him to continue to read would strain his eyes, possibly into blindness. Heisman plays as an end in 1891. But he struggles with what to do in the classroom. He can't read his texts, so he convinces his classmates to read their assignments to him. He asks for a waiver to take his final exams orally. The waiver was granted, and Heisman took his law exams orally and passed. On June 6, 1892, he was one of 37 students who received degrees in law from the University of Pennsylvania. That should give you an idea of what a determined person Heisman was. After graduating, Heisman contemplates his career options, as he couldn't stand to do the heavy reading required to practice law. He began his coaching career in 1892 at Oberlin College in Ohio, about 35 miles southwest of Cleveland. They didn't have money to pay him, but he took the job anyway, as he saw it as an opportunity to not only coach, but to continue to play, as eligibility rules were pretty sketchy back then. He enrolled as a grad student, but there's no evidence he attended a class. According to the book, When Oberlin Was King of the Gridiron, The Heisman Years, by Nat Brandt, published in 2001. His name was John Heisman. He was enrolled at Oberlin as a postgraduate student in its art department. On paper, that is, for his matriculation was a figment of someone's imagination. He never, so far it is known, attended a single class, and never, it is known, earned a single mark or grade. As a postgraduate, however, he was, according to the lax rules of the day, eligible to play football as well as coach the school team and play for Oberlin. He would, his poor eyesight notwithstanding. In his first season, Oberlin outscores their opponents 262-20 and goes 7-0. Although the victory over Michigan is disputed to this day. I have another video on that game you might find interesting. Note Oberlin also beat Ohio State twice in that season, although Ohio State wouldn't become Ohio State until the late 1910s. Heisman's innovative approaches in 1892 included the use of the double pass and shifting the quarterback to the safety position on defense, strategies that were revolutionary at the time. He leaves Oberlin for Bucktail College, now known as the University of Akron, because Oberlin still can't pay him. Bucktail hires him to coach baseball, football, and be their athletic director. It's at Bucktail College Heisman invents the center snap as we know it today. Typically, the ball was put in play by the center kicking it back with his foot or leaning over and rolling it on the ground to the quarterback. But Heisman's quarterback, Harry Clark, was 6'4" and had trouble bending over to pick up the ball, so Heisman instructed his center to throw the ball up to Clark. He goes 5-2 in 1893 and 1-0 in 1894 before going back to coach Oberlin again in 1894, where he goes 4-3-1. He falls in love with a woman named Edith Mayora Cole, but in late 1894, she falls ill. At first, they believe it's a bad cold, but she's later diagnosed with consumption, or what we know as tuberculosis. At that time, tuberculosis was the third leading cause of death in the United States, behind only heart disease and influenza. Heisman vows to marry her anyway, but she refuses, not wanting to leave him as a widower. So he leaves her behind to head south, taking the head coaching job at Auburn, where he stays from 1895 to 1899. In his first game against Vanderbilt, he has his quarterback, Reynolds Tichenor, run a hidden ball trick. From the History of Southern Football, Volume 1 by Fuzzy Woodruff, Tichenor explains the play. The play was simply this. When the ball was snapped, it went to a halfback. The play was closely masked and well screened. The halfback then thrust the ball under the back of my jersey. Then he would crash into the line. After the play, I simply trotted away to a touchdown. Now, this move is copied by Pop Warner in 1903 when the Carlisle Indians use it to stun Harvard. Also, while at Auburn, Heisman is credited with coming up with the idea of the quarterback saying hike to put the ball in play. He uses this to great purpose to draw the other teams off sides. Over the course of his years at Auburn, he established a pretty decent record, but as you can see, they didn't play a lot of games. Football at the South at that time was far behind the teams of the Northeast. One more interesting note about Heisman's time at Auburn. In 1897, the football team found itself $700 in debt, so Heisman produced a comedy play, as in theater, making enough money for Auburn to play football in 1898. Heisman was hired by Clemson after the 1899 season to coach football and baseball. In his first season, Heisman led his team to a perfect 6-0 record and a Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Association championship, outscoring their opponents 222-10. He compiled an excellent record at Clemson from 1900 to 1903, losing only 3 games and tying 2 in that time frame. His baseball team compiled a 28-6-1 record. Clemson had only begun playing football in 1896, but by the time Heisman was finished, Clemson was one of the most dominant teams in the South. In 1901, they beat Guilford College of North Carolina 122-0. Heisman was becoming known as an innovator. He wrote several letters to Walter Camp, the father of American football, in support of legalizing the forward pass. During the 1895 season, Heisman saw an illegal forward pass when Georgia played North Carolina. Georgia was about to block a punt when the North Carolina player threw the ball out of desperation to another North Carolina player, who then caught it and ran 70 yards for a touchdown. Georgia coach Pop Warner complained to the referee that the play was illegal, but the referee let the play stand because he did not see the pass. The play influenced Heisman so much that he became one of the most avid supporters of the forward pass, which was then legalized in 1906. I'd encourage you to watch my Foundation playlist if you are interested in learning more about how modern college football came to be. Heisman was also becoming known as a great coach. In an interview from the Atlanta Constitution on October 19, 1903, the Clemson coach is the most successful man in his business in the South and has evolved a system of play all his own, which has been universally successful. He also says about his offense, "The reports that I have discarded tricks is untrue," said Heisman. "I use as many tricks now as I did several years ago, and I do not intend to give up these tricks. Tricks help to run up the score and aid the team in many ways. I find that these tricks are just as successful against strong as weak teams. All this talk, however, about our playing nothing but tricks is absurd. It is paradoxical in itself. Here one critic says that Clemson plays nothing but tricks, and immediately adds that such tricks will not work against good teams. This is an absurd statement, for we had played good, strong teams and won from them constantly. Therefore, one of two things is certainly true, either that we do not play tricks or that the tricks are successful." By the end of the 1903 season, Heisman was sought by Auburn, Clemson, Georgia, and Georgia Tech, with Georgia Tech going to exorbitant lengths to get him. The Georgia Tech students pledged money to help hiring him, and they raised about $2,000 so that Clemson could no longer afford him. Georgia Tech paid him an annual salary of $2,250 plus 30% of the net gate receipts from his varsity baseball and football games. This would increase over time. Tech had started playing football in 1892. Before Heisman's arrival in 1904, they'd won 11 games, tied 5, and lost 37. They were desperate to build a winner. Heisman stayed at Georgia Tech for 16 seasons from 1904 to 1919. He won a national title in 1917 while going undefeated 4 seasons, along with a 33-game undefeated streak. His most memorable game at Georgia Tech was his 222-0 win over Cumberland in 1916. This game has been heavily covered as the biggest blowout in college football history, as it should be. It was a revenge game, as Cumberland had beaten Heisman's baseball team 22-0, and Heisman suspected Cumberland had hired professional ringers. Cumberland had ended their football program, but Heisman refused to let them out of their contract, so a bunch of Cumberland students showed up who had no idea how to play football. I may cover this game further with a video of my own, but as I said, it's been heavily covered elsewhere. Now, the 1917 team finished undefeated at 9-0, the first national title for any Southern team. Pop Warner's Pittsburgh team was also undefeated, but Tech was chosen as the title winner because the Golden Tornado, as Tech was known at the time, beat 9-2 Penn 41-0. Pittsburgh could only beat them 14-6. Now, the nation clamored for a game between Pitt and Georgia Tech to play for a real national title. At first, the faculties are opposed, but Georgia Tech's faculty relents. They issued a challenge to Pittsburgh, but Pitt declines. Remember how I told you how Heisman left his first love behind to die in Oberlin, Ohio? Well, he found another one. He married a woman named Evelyn McCollum Cox, who was an actress in a theater company. They were married on October 29th, 1903, which is a fall wedding during football season. The day after his Clemson team beat North Carolina 24-0. It was a small wedding, only a few friends attended. Evelyn McCollum Cox used the stage name Evelyn Barksdale. So why did Heisman marry an actress? Because John Heisman was part of the same theater company. According to Heisman, the man behind the trophy, Heisman was a very well-rounded and gifted actor, performing on Broadway and in numerous theaters across the South. The Macon Telegraph reported on May 24, 1902, that Heisman gives the assurance that Macon will be treated this summer to a higher class of theatrical entertainment that has ever been yet presented at the Park Theater. All the plays will be produced under his personal direction, and they are to include some of the latest metropolitan successes and many that the patrons of Crump's Park had never seen anywhere before. And then later in the article, according to reviews written by the Macon Telegraph that summer, Heisman certainly backed up his lofty proclamation. On June 6, 1902, a packed house of more than 1,500 people watched Heisman play the lead role of Monsieur Dublé in the French drama Wife in Name Only. The Telegraph said Heisman again appeared to an excellent advantage, accepting numerous opportunities to display dramatic force, the superior order which he undeniably possesses. His work is easy, calm, impressive, and above the standard, and certainly unlike the swaggerish, overdone attempts sometimes witnessed. Imagine his halftime speeches or his pregame warm-up speeches. Heisman eventually walked away from the stage, but remained involved in theater and the evolving business of moving pictures. In 1908, Heisman and his partner, George Greenwood, operated Empire Theatrical Exchange in Atlanta, which served as a booking and casting company for stock companies throughout the country. In 1919, Heisman and his first wife get a divorce. Heisman tells his close friends that he will let his ex-wife pick where she wishes to live, and he will live in another place so as to avoid social embarrassment. Evelyn chose Atlanta, and therefore it was time for Heisman to leave Georgia Tech and coach somewhere else. Heisman returned to his alma mater, the University of Pennsylvania, as head coach. He would coach there for 3 years, 3 rather unsuccessful years given the expectations when he arrived. Heisman had developed an offense called the Heisman Shift. I'll let the book Heisman, the Man Behind the Trophy explain it. One of Heisman's players at Georgia Tech recalled everyone watching the center, whose responsibility was to size up the defense as the back stood in a straight I formation, particular to the line of scrimmage. When the center swooped down over the ball, the backs hopped, and in one motion, the center snapped the ball straight to the designated back, whose job was to carry, pass, or punt. As a result, the backfield formation was disguised until the last possible instant. The scheme became known as the Heisman Shift, and it was largely unstoppable at Georgia Tech, which piled up 491 points in its national championship season in 1917. However, Heisman's offense proved to be ineffective at Penn, where his teams never scored more than 167 points in a season. Under new rules introduced in 1921, players in motion had to come to a complete stop before the ball was snapped. It was a drastic change at the time, and it's a rule that's still observed in football today. As a result of the rule, the Heisman Shift is no longer effective as it was before. While at Penn, Heisman is reacquainted with a person from his past. He is shocked while at practice. Someone is insulting him from the stands. He and his team stalk toward the transgressor to find it was Edith Mayora Cole, the woman he had left on her deathbed in Ohio nearly 3 decades earlier. Stricken with tuberculosis, Cole recovered, but later suffered mysterious bouts in which she would lose her voice for weeks at a time. Cole's physician believed that higher altitude would repair her throat and lungs, so she moved to Denver and her condition improved. But after returning to Ohio to visit her mother in 1898, Cole lost her voice again. Her physician recommended a peculiar remedy: inhaling the fumes from a battery plant in Cleveland. For several days, Cole sat in the factory, and eventually her voice returned for good. Is that wild or what? I have no idea what the battery plant fumes would do for tuberculosis, but if you got an idea, leave it in the comments section. Cole had stayed out of Heisman's life when he married the actress, not wanting to cause a problem. She had married a Denver millionaire, but when they got divorced in 1921, she tracked Heisman down. They are soon married, and Cole stays with him the rest of his life. After Penn, Heisman heads to Washington Jefferson College in Washington, Pennsylvania for a 3-year contract for $10,000 annually. He stays only 1 year, but leads the team to a 6-1-1 record. Of note is a game against Washington and Lee University of Lexington, West Virginia. Heisman's roster includes a black player, Charles Pruner West. Heisman insists he will play, but the opposing coach, Jimmy DeHart, refuses. The game is canceled. Wikipedia shows it as such. Washington Jefferson College doesn't even show it on their schedule for 1923, while Washington and Lee has no football information that I could find. Heisman stayed at Washington and Jefferson for only 1 season. His relationship with boosters and alumni became frayed after his only loss of the season, a 13-6 setback against Pittsburgh. From the News Journal of Lancaster, Pennsylvania on November 22, 1923. As a result of the 13-6 defeat by Pittsburgh, officials of Washington and Jefferson may ask John W. Heisman, former Penn coach, to relieve them of his 3-year contract. Alumni claim the football players have lost confidence in their coach, and that there is no other alternative for the officials to take than to ask Heisman to resign, which he does later. Next time you hear someone lament about how patient we used to be with coaches, you can tell them this story. Heisman heads to Rice in Texas for the 1924 season. It will be his last coaching stop. He negotiates a contract for $9,000 a year that also stipulates he only has to live in Houston during football season and a few weeks in the spring. Unfortunately, Heisman has difficulty recruiting athletes because of Rice's stringent academic requirements. In his first season, he beats TCU in Texas, but the win over the Longhorns will be his best in his 4 years. The last game of his career was a 19-6 win over Baylor. Heisman finished with an overall record of 186 wins, 70 losses, and 18 ties. He won 1 national title in a time when it was darn difficult for Southern teams to do so. He won 7 conference titles in a period where conferences were kind of just getting started. He was done coaching, but he certainly wasn't done with football. Heisman and his wife moved to New York, where he made a living writing articles for newspapers and magazines, with also being involved in sporting goods. Heisman became the man chosen to become the first athletic director of New York's Downtown Athletic Club. In 1933, Heisman helped to organize the first touchdown club of New York, and in 1935, inaugurated the first Downtown Athletic Club trophy for the best college football player east of the Mississippi. Initially, Heisman was opposed to the idea of singling out an individual player over a team. However, he eventually recognized it as a consummate team accomplishment and agreed to organize the award. The first Downtown Athletic Club award was presented in 1935 to Jay Berwanger of the University of Chicago. John Heisman died on October 3, 1936 from pneumonia. He is buried in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, where he maintained a summer home near his wife Edith's family. Edith would be buried next to him when she passed on November 19, 1963, at the age of 94. John Heisman's legacy was immortalized when on December 10, 1936, the trophy was renamed the Heisman Memorial Trophy in his honor. Today, the Heisman Trophy remains the most coveted individual award in college football, a testament to Heisman's enduring influence on the sport. Thank you for watching. I drew some material from the book Heisman, the Man Behind the Trophy. It's linked in the description, and I encourage you to read it if you're interested in knowing much more about John Heisman, because there's some fascinating stories in there that I didn't even touch upon. This is John Johnston with Hardcore College Football History. Thank you.